frontline world. Stories from a small planet.
There's a province in western China where people are afraid to speak. It's called Xinjiang. Coming here would change my life. Xinjiang is mostly desert with a number of high mountain ranges that surround it. The Chinese, for many years, it's been sort of like their Siberia. It's where they sent people, where they built a lot of their penal colonies. Xinjiang is the homeland of 8 million Sufi Muslims. They are known as the Uyghurs, and they call this place East Turkestan. Independent reporting is forbidden here, so I came as a tourist, undercover, to see what life is like for Muslims in China. They speak a different language. They look very different from the Han Chinese, and most of them live in the far northwest of China in the Xinjiang province. They practice Islam, but it's a more relaxed form. The men typically, they drink. The women do not cover up very much. But now the borders are open with Pakistan. To some degree, the Chinese do fear ideas will percolate in and that they may join this global movement toward militant Islam. The people tend to be fairly segregated. Each town, there's a Uyghur section and there's a Chinese section. The Chinese section tends to be more modern, a lot of, bigger buildings, skyscrapers, and the office buildings. And the Uyghurs tend to be more agricultural. There's, stalls where they sell food and smaller markets. They tend to be very poor. There was one interview we had set up in advance. He was a Uyghur man who had agreed to meet us. He was very articulate, and at the same time, he was terrified to come, just to come to our hotel to see us. He was terrified. He sat in our hotel room trembling for, close to an hour and refused to be videotaped. I felt that in order to tell the story, someone like that had to be shown. When I returned to the United States, I found a Uyghur exile willing to speak out.
Hi, hello. This is Laura Ling. My father was one of the victims of the Chinese regime. He was a pro-independence person. He had this deep belief that Uyghur people deserved an independent state. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Today, Alam and his brother live in the United States under political asylum.
China conquered us, occupied us, and treated us like slaves, dogs, whatever, not as human beings. Just force us to live according to Chinese culture and Chinese standard, and we will not accept that. I don't think we have ever accepted that. And that's why, as feeble as we are, we're still struggling against Chinese rule. Yeah.
While I was back in the United States, I received an email from the Uyghur man who had been too frightened to talk to us earlier. He said he had decided to talk. At the end of October, I flew back to China and went to the capital in Urumqi and met him. He was still very frightened. He said that if the government knew that he had come to talk with me, he would be punished very severely. He talked a bit about the fact that Uyghurs can't express themselves. He didn't talk about separatism. He simply said they wanted to be able to speak freely. He brought with him a list of about 20 names and ages of Uyghurs, he said, that he'd read in the newspaper had been either imprisoned or executed. We finished the interview at sunset. As soon as we got out the front door, we walked down the driveway a little bit. I turned to say something to him, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye these two men dressed in plain dark clothing walking towards us. They walked towards us, they grabbed his arm, they grabbed my arm, showed us identification and told us they were the police and we needed to go back upstairs to his room with them. They had him take off his jacket, empty out his pockets, and they told him to stand against the wall. He was so frightened he fell to his knees and he passed out. They took him into another room, and when they brought him back, he was crying. And the rest of the time that I was with him, he was just crying with his head in his hands. They asked me, why did I want to talk with terrorists? Again and again, just conflating the words terrorist, Uyghur, separatist. In their minds, it was all one thing. I only had one tape, and they took it. I'm assuming it's now evidence against him. Experts in China, human rights advocates have said, if he gets 3 to 5 years in prison, you should just be happy for him and just not say anything.
But since that night, I haven't been able to obtain any information about him. That's why I decided to reveal his identity, to bring attention to his situation. His name is Dilkesh Tilavaldi. He worked for the city of Gulja. He was taken away on the night of October 19th by the Ministry of State Security.
You subscribe to those journalistic ethics that say that the story is important. It's important to get the truth out there, but, you know, the price was very high and I didn't have to pay it. So, if I could take it back, I would. I think about his wife and his children. You know, what are they going to do? So I regret.
There's more of the world to explore on our website. Discuss the world and tell us what you think of our stories from a small planet at pbs.org.